Go. We're
All
going to
right,
go ahead and do that. And
let's see if I
beautiful.
give me 1 second. I'll start sharing my screen, maybe.
And I will welcome everyone. Kevin McNicholas here, school social worker in Gillespie. Happy to welcome our friend and colleague, Savannah Holthaus. She's going to be discussing McKinney Vento, unhoused families, a lot of resources. Savannah is, I will call you the expert, Savannah. You're who I always call with questions, so that makes you the expert automatically. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I will let you take it away. You got some great info for us today. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you just taking the time to really give our unhoused population some spotlight, because we see that more and more and more in our school districts and outside of our school districts. So I have really been collaborating a lot with DCFS and intact workers and other agencies that are also trying to provide services for families, but we all have all this red tape, right? And so it takes a community to help support families. And so let's dive in. So we'll jump into what is homeless when it comes to school districts. Well, we try not to use the word homeless because that has a lot of stigma to it, right? And that can be very upsetting for families to hear. So the grant I actually work under is called the McKinney Vento Act. And this is a federal grant. Oh. This is a federal. Hold on. Can everybody hear me?
Sorry about that, Savannah. I
Yeah.
muted everyone, not realizing it would mute you as well. Apologies.
That's okay. This is fine. I worked in preschool for a long time. So you just learn to we just keep chugging forward, right? So the McKinney Vento Act establishes a definition for homeless used by all school districts. This isn't just us. This is every school district in the United States uses the same definition for homeless. And it can be kind of confusing because it's not the same definition that HUD uses for homeless. That's kind of ingrained. So if you are coming onto this from like a human services side, you probably have HUD homeless definition, but there's actually a handful of programs that use the McKinney Vento definition. So what was established by this federal law was the right for students who are unhoused to be able to access education, even if they don't have all the paperwork or if they don't have a residency form. We want to be able to allow those children not only to access school, but to fully participate in school. And so this federal law addresses the unique barriers that we see with our unhoused student population. So what's the definition? So McKinney Vento is any student who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So that can be really broad, right? Children and youth who are sharing housing due to economic hardship, housing insecurity, emergencies, children and youth who have a primary nighttime residence that's a public or private place that is not normally designed for sleeping in, and children and youth who are living in cars, parks, public spaces, abandoned buildings, and then migratory children who meet one of the definitions above. So we see families that are not just at hotels, motels, campgrounds, they qualify. But when we think about McKinney Vento, these are also families that are doubled up. Most of our families are doubled up. And then when we think about public or private places, I have families that have had to utilize their storage units, that have had to utilize abandoned houses or condemned houses to live in with their children. So we're going to dive a little bit into what we see most often in our communities. Sharing the housing of other persons. So this implies that the child or youth is staying in someone else's residence. This is the biggest difference that we see from HUD, because with the HUD definition, you are literally homeless. You do not have a roof over your head. The McKinney Vento definition that our schools use acknowledge the fact that families are sometimes forced to live with other people due to economic hardship. So what we ask our school districts to do when they're confused about if families are living together by choice or out of necessity, we always go back to, do they have a legal right to be in the home? What we see often is one family will move in with another family and they're not on the lease, and they can be asked to leave at any time, and they are asked to leave, right? So then we end up with these families that are kind of couch surfing, or the kids can double up with this family for a little while, but mom and dad maybe can't be there. And then another question we ask is, did economic hardship due to illness, loss of employment, loss of public benefits, or similar reason force the family or youth to share the housing? So, what prompted that? And we can catch this in a number of ways, registration, but a lot of times we catch it when kids' their bus route changes, right? Or they don't have regular access to the things that they always did because they're kind of bouncing around. So if dad or mom loses their job or somebody gets hurt, that's a red flag that we need to watch out for if the housing situation changes, right? Adequacy is probably the hardest one we identify with McKinney Vento because it falls under homeless, but these might be families that do have their own home. And parents don't show up to a school district and say, "Hi, my house isn't adequate for my child." That's just simply not going to happen. So homes are inadequate for children is through our relationships with them, right? Through conversation with parents. If you're working at another agency, it might be the parents seeking assistance for something. So when we think about adequacy, we're thinking about a residence that is sufficient for meeting the both physical and psychological needs typically met in home environments. So how many people are living in the house? Do you have 8 people in a 1 or 2 bedroom house? That's probably not adequate if there are 6 of them are children. Where are they sleeping? Do they actually have beds? What are the conditions? Is there adequate heat, electricity, and water? And so these are families that now that it's getting colder, we're going to figure out really quick who doesn't have power and who doesn't have water, right? We'll see an uptick in kids who maybe were able to hide that they didn't have power or water, or now that power bills are going to be on the rise again with heating cost, we'll see that trickle effect. And the other thing is significant infestations in the home. So if a family has a significant infestation of bed bugs, cockroaches, or even chronic head lice, they can fall under this McKinney Vento homeless definition for the inadequacies. And we know who these kiddos are. We know who these families are. So when they come into our building, it's the kiddos that they unzip their backpack and cockroaches crawl out of their backpack, or the kiddos that we see, or the families that we see that have bug bites all over their arms from bed bugs. Again, these families don't necessarily self-identify as homeless, and they may not. This may be a house that a mom works really, really hard to keep a roof over her kids' head. So we would never say your home is inadequate and you're considered homeless because of it. But what we would say is, because of this, your living situation, and because we see that you're struggling with bed bugs, there's actually some supports we can put in place for your kiddos at school, because life is really hard, right? And we don't want to make education one of the things that are really hard. And the last group I always like to touch on is unaccompanied youth. So unaccompanied youth is a subset that falls under the McKinney Vento definition. So families that don't have fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence, but especially youth that are not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. These are the hardest people to serve because they fall in limbo where they're not quite old enough to get services independently, but there's usually no guardianship or legal paperwork that establishes whoever they're staying with as a legal guardian. So when we say unaccompanied youth, we mean anybody that's not with a physical parent or guardian. And by guardian, McKinney Vento, we want legal documentation of guardianship. So not just a notarized letter, but does this guardian have the documentation to be able to take the student and take them to the doctor, get them health insurance, enroll them in school under this guardianship clause? So if they don't have that, they're considered an unaccompanied youth. It's really important to remember, especially I feel like in our rural areas, we know our families. We know their mom, their dad, their cousins, we know their grandma, and it can be really easy to judge a living situation. It can be really easy to go, well, Johnny left home because he couldn't follow his parents' rules. He's choosing not to return home. McKinney Vento doesn't give us a reason why they left as to whether they can access services. If they are not with their parent for any reason, and we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, right? Because kids don't disclose everything to us. So what we do know is that when kids are not with a parent or guardian, the statistics that they are putting themselves in other dangerous situations go way, way up. So we want to make sure that they have access to our school buildings and that they're fully engaged in school, because when they're not at school, they're not with their parents. I also want to note that there's no minimum age. So we often think of unaccompanied youth as those high schoolers that are couch surfing, and they absolutely are. But you can also have a 6-year-old unaccompanied youth who maybe one parent isn't in their life at all and never has been, and the other parent became incarcerated. So little Sally in 2nd grade goes to live with her aunt. Aunt's caregiver for now, but that Sally would still be an unaccompanied youth because she's not with a parent or guardian. And if you have any questions that come up in the chat, Kevin, just feel free to shoot those out or we can answer those at the end. So feel free to ask questions. All families are different, all situations are different. And so a lot of things we take on a case-by-case basis when we're looking at this whole definition, because there can be some gray in there, right? So now that we know who is McKinney Vento, what does that mean? What can we do for them? So the federal law outlines 16 services explicitly that school districts provide to students and or families that are experiencing a sort of McKinney Vento unhousedness. So first of all, we want to connect them to tutoring and supplemental instructional support. So last year we were able to offer schools extra money for summer school programs and tutoring programs. And that was really cool. And as long as they had a McKinney Vento kid in there, we were able to use that funding. We have kiddos that just need one-on-one support, but we can actually help run a whole classroom. Expedited evaluations for testing for gifted special ed ELL. We do PD for teachers, admin, and staff, interagency, anybody that will hear us talk about this subject, because we're all kind of part of this field where we're serving families. We give referrals for medical, dental, and other health services. So it's really vital that our school staff are aware of where to access those resources. We provide transportation for regular after school and special ed services for our McKinney Vento students. What's important to note there is if families are bouncing around a lot, we can keep them at their school of origin and provide transportation back to their original school so they don't have to move schools every time they move houses, and we can keep them kind of continually with one school as long as logistically it makes sense and that's what the parent would like. We always refer the little kiddos to early childhood or birth to 3 programs. We know how important that is, and so we want to connect them to those early childhood services. And then comparable services means anything that any other housed student would have access to, we ensure that our unhoused students have access to those same services. Before and after and summer school programs, kind of talked about that a little bit. Obtaining and transferring school records necessary for enrollment. One of the clauses of McKinney Vento is that we do not ever hold school records for money owed. So it doesn't matter if a kid is bouncing between one school district or another and there's a past due balance of anything, that will not ever prevent them from transferring their paperwork to get them enrolled. We're always giving parent education on the rights of their students. We coordinate between schools and the local services. So this might look like health departments, community action, even our local transportation departments to help parents get access to get to their own medical appointments. So CIPT or Macoupin County Transit. Counseling and other specific needs due to domestic violence. Anytime a family is fleeing domestic violence, they will fall under inadequacy under McKinney Vento if they have to flee their housing, right? So that may not be an economic hardship, but their home, if it's not safe, it's not adequate for their psychological needs. So we know that that can be a vast array of needs for families and students fleeing domestic violence. So that's kind of an umbrella term that's used there, right, for other specific needs. And then we can adapt spaces and supplies to provide offsite services. Generally, we'll see that in our bigger school districts where we just may need to house something in a specific community where our school's not at. We provide school supplies and then emergency assistance to enable a student to attend school. So a lot of us in our contract has like other duties as assigned. This is that. So this is like whatever we need to make sure a student can attend to school. Now there is some things that we cannot do. So I cannot pay for hotels. And then I cannot buy food for like dinner for a family. I connect them to those other services, but I can buy air mattresses because that would be emergency assistance to enable a student to attend school and participate fully. So if we have a kiddo that's sleeping on the floor, then I can justify an air mattress, absolutely, because if they don't sleep at home, they're going to come to school and sleep and not get an education, right? So there's some gray area there on what is emergency assistance, and that's just going to be dependent on the needs of that student. So we talked a little bit about school supplies, but I really want everybody to be aware of what all fees can be waived at school, because it's not just school supplies. There's a million things, right, that schools and students are expected to have funding for. So we can waive fees for textbooks and instructional materials. That includes if a student is taking a music class or an art class or a class that they need a specific item for. If it's expected for every student to have that item, then we can use McKinney Vento funding to pay for that. So again, talks about lab equipment, field trips made during or after school hours, uniforms, that includes PE uniforms. It talks about particular classes such as shop, home ec, labs, graduation fees. So if we have a lot of school districts that utilize some funding to pay for their unaccompanied youth seniors to make sure that they have a cap and gown for graduation and they're not paying for that themselves. School health services. If a family doesn't have insurance and we need a physical and we need an immunization, we can use funding to pay for the physical, pay for the eyeglasses, driver's ed fees, electronic fees, and charges for breakfast and lunch. So actually, all McKinney Vento students are categorically eligible for the free breakfast and lunch program. So that's an automatic. It doesn't cover everything. So we can't cover like classroom, school pictures, things like that. But again, if everybody else is expected to have it, then we don't want our McKinney Vento students to have a barrier in accessing the same baseline educational expectations. This also includes sports. So school sanctioned sports. So we can help students get uniforms, not just for PE, but uniforms for football, help them get cleats, things like that. A lot of times, and let me just finish that thought. A lot of times it's the ask. So families may not, I'm going to go back here. Families may not realize that all these things that they can get help with. Because if you think about a family that can't afford their rent or that's saving every penny for a deposit and their first month's rent because they're unhoused, we do not want to nickel and dime parents for the T1 calculator, for the cap and gown fees, for whatever it is, if we can help these families not pull their wallet out every time so they can really prioritize that funding for housing or other immediate needs, that's what we want to do. And so it's super important that everybody online on this, webinar understands that maybe these things won't be immediately offered. And so a lot of times we have to be the advocate for that student and that family and say, hey, did you know that we can get the cap and gown fee waived? Did you know that because you were staying at your cousin's while you're trying to find another place, there's some things that the school can do for you? And so just keep that in mind, because sometimes school district staff, not everybody knows a family's housing situation. It may only be the secretary, and the teacher may not realize that this is an unhoused student when they send home that field trip fee. So if you have a parent that's in your office saying, I don't know how I'm going to afford XYZ, and they name something that is from the school district for like a field trip, that's something we can go, hey, I think there's actually another program, and because of your living situation, you qualify for that. So just keep that in mind. I am going to send this PowerPoint out so you'll have this list as well. So what can you guys do? I'm not sure what everybody's role specifically is on here, but I will tell you that every single school district in Illinois has a district homeless liaison. So I am a regional homeless liaison for ROE 3 and 40, and you can always call me and I'll kind of loop you back into who's feet on the ground in that district. But linked on this slide is going to be the ISB liaison information. And you can click this link and it's going to take you to ISB McKinney Vento homeless liaison locator. If you just type in whatever school district you're working with, it's going to give you the specific name, phone number, and email of that district liaison. You can say, hey, I was in a training with Savannah Holthaus and she said you could help me. If you aren't sure, you can always reach out to me. And then being aware that there are funds set aside. So I talked about all these services and it's like, well, where does this come from? McKinney Vento falls under Title I, and every school district is required to put some funding in that Title I line item. And so I don't know how much each school district does. It all depends on their demographic and their needs. So I have some school districts that have a ton of community collaboration and they don't need as much money in their homeless set aside, right? Because they already have a school backpack program. They have a ministerial alliance that will get coats and hats and school supplies and all those things. And then I have other school districts that have thousands of dollars in there because maybe they have an exceptional number of students or they have a lot of needs they need to pull out of there. But every school district does have funding to cover the services needed for students. If a school district did run out of funding, they would reach out to me and I would work with the school district to meet the need. The other thing is being aware of local resources. So we created a resource guide for ROE 3 and ROE 40. And let me see if I can click into this just to show you what it looks like. Is it showing you the resource directory? Okay, so let's scroll. If you're in ROE 3 or 40, which is Bond, Calhoun, Christian, Effingham, Fayette, Greene, Jersey, Macoupin, and Montgomery counties, this is kind of your hub of information. And we created this for our school districts just to be aware of all these other resources in the community. But what we find is resources in the community also need to be aware of each other, right? Because post-COVID, there wasn't a lot of interagency collaboration, in-person meetings, things like that. And so now that we're in this post-COVID era, we're all reconnecting the spider web of resources. So let's see if it'll let me kind of quick scroll through here. I wanted to just show you some information. So this book is going to contain our community action agencies. So if you are not aware of what community action is, every county in Illinois is covered by a community action agency. That agency is going to house like your rapid rehousing programs, deposit and rental assistance, LIHEAP, which is low income heating and energy assistance program. It's the program that helps families pay for their power bills. They're just a hub of information, and oftentimes our first go-to if a family is in immediate housing crisis. I also included mental health services, shelters, transportation, childcare information, unaccompanied youth programs, and DV programs. So these are all listed in the front of this book because all of the maps don't line up, right? We all have our own like service areas. And so the service areas are so overlapping that we're like, okay, you all get your own little spot in the book. And then you'll notice that it starts going by county, right? So if we just scroll down to one of our counties, sorry, let me get there. It's a lot in the front of the book. So if we scroll down to Bond County, once we get to county information, it tells us where are our food pantries, what are their hours, is there a contact number and name, where are our medical services? This isn't going to have every medical service, but it is going to have the places that take a medical card or that have a sliding scale, right? Who's the housing agencies? Again, this isn't going to have every landlord, but it's going to have all or most of our subsidized housing, places that take rental assistance, places that take Section 8, and if they have an email address. So it's really good if you have a family that you're trying to triage a handful of things for, you can get this book, you can print it out. If you think your agency is going to want 10 or more of these, the back page, the last page of this PDF, which is going to be shared with everybody, we actually release the printing rights. So any agency can request this book and have it printed from our printing company, and you can just have it. Like, we're not hoarding this at all. Reach out to them. They will print you as many as you want because we just want this book to be in everybody's hands. The beauty of this book also is it's like this big. So it can fit in a diaper bag. It can fit in a purse. It can fit in somebody's back pocket if they need to. So it's just a wealth of information that we want families, community agencies, and school staff to have access to. In addition, each section is going to have community services, and this looks vastly different for each of our communities, right? So in Bond County, they have BCMW. That's their community action agency. But they also have a crisis nursery that can get diapers and things for families that have littles. And then we list out if churches have emergency assistance, because our ministerial alliances will often step in and pay for emergency hotels. They'll help families with a car repair. They will help families with a mirage of things. There's all kinds of things. So I just wanted to quickly show you this book. And then I didn't put this in the slideshow, but I'll show it to you here. There's a lot of QR codes on here. I have one of these made up for all of the areas in Area 5. Here, I'll show you my map. Let's see if we can get back to the slideshow. All right, are we back in the slideshow? Okay, so we have resources kind of everywhere. And if you are not in ROE 3 or 40, I wanted to share with you your contact for your area. So our ROE, my program that I specifically work under is Area 5. It's going to be that green area in the southwest part of Illinois. But like I said, every area has these services, right? And so if you are working with families that are in any other part of Illinois, the map is going to give you the lead liaison. So that would be Angela Reeder for our area. So she is our lead liaison. But if you have a family that you just need to connect and you don't know what school district they're in, you can reach out to the lead liaison. Now, if you are in Area 5, but you're not in ROE 3 or 40, you can reach out to Tim, Tina, or Mark. They are the regional homeless liaisons that cover all the other counties in the green area. And especially if you want resources. So like Tim is going to have the resources for Madison County homeless program. Tina is going to have like Randolph and Monroe. Mark is going to have St. Clair. In addition, if anybody's interested, reach out to me. I have, like I said, these QR codes. So this is a simple one pager that you can print, and it talks about what is McKinney Vento, what is the definition. But on the back, these QR codes are for our resource guides. They're Find Food Illinois, which will pull up a map of every food pantry. There are schoolhouse connection programs. There's a referral form for me. So if you work with an agency that you need a paper trail and you want a official referral to me and my program, I have that, and it'll link you right to my referral. So yeah, there is a whole team of people that are willing to help and support students make sure they have access to their education. Where are we at for time? 11:30. Okay, I need to hustle here a little bit.
You are totally good, Savannah. I will say we do have a question in there. Do you know, is there a hard copy resource guide for St. Clair and Madison counties? Would that be something Tim would have access to that you know?
Yes, there is.
I
If
thought I
you
had seen one time. Go ahead, sorry.
Yes, so Madison County has an entire resource guide on their Madison County website. But like I said, if they're interested in that, the QR code I have for Madison County has that resource guide on it, and it'll take you straight there. So after this, I'll just email you. There's like 4 of them because there's one for ROE 3 and 40, 41, 45, and 50. And it'll have those on there. If not, you can reach out to that regional staff like Tim, Tina, or Mark, and they can give you that. So those do exist in all of our counties. ROE 3 and 40 was the only area that we didn't already have something that exists, and that's why the ROE stepped in and we created it, because it didn't already exist within our community.
It's pretty incredible. I'm not going to lie. It's very, very, very complete.
It is a beast, and it changes.
Right.
So I will say, if you are a program that serves our unhoused population and you're not in the book and you feel like you should be, in the front of that has my information. I update that book every year. And so, or if you're working for a program that you had changes, you changed your phone number, please email me that, because I'll update that in the spring, and then it'll live in our book, either right or wrong, for a year. And I'd rather not send families or our staff down a rabbit hole for a phone number that doesn't work or for a program that doesn't exist anymore. So we can't put every program in the book. So you'll notice, I mean, I don't have like nursing home information and senior services, right? But we wanted to keep it as direct as we could for our school districts. But there is a lot of overlap that community agencies can utilize. All right, I wanted to talk just briefly about some specific things when we have families experiencing homelessness. What do we do in our school district, and what can you do? So we know that homeless students often suffer from more chronic illness. We as a district can assist them in getting immunizations and medical records. We also do not exclude those students on the October 15th deadline if we are working with them to get their required physical and immunizations. ISB does have an unaccompanied youth form that we can use. So if we have a 14 or 15, 16-year-old, and it's for older students, there's an Illinois law that says students 14 and above can seek medical consent without a guardian. And this isn't going to go like get kids, like you break your arm and a kid needs surgery. It's not going to do that, but it will help us get basic needs met. We can get a school physical, we can get immunizations. We've been able to access some mental health resources with that form. So just being aware that school districts and our school nurses, we try to help families get those basic needs that we have to have for school. Also mental health, we know that our unhoused population is more likely to experience some sort of trauma. And so we try to refer them to school social workers and counselors. But in addition, we want to be aware of the referral process and the access for those families to get access to mental health services outside of school districts, right? Because our school counselors can't bear the weight and generational trauma of all the families and students that we have. So how do we how do we connect those parents, grandparents, and caregivers? So that kind of goes back to the resource book, just being aware. How do I refer grandma? Because when summer happens, these students can't call you, right? So it's just really important to connect them to our mental health services. You guys know, preaching to the choir here. Um, being aware that we do provide clothing, hygiene, and school supplies, and then also being aware of childcare referral and resource line. So I don't know if you guys are all familiar with this, but the childcare referral and resource line is a program that helps families find childcare that's like a DCFS licensed either in a daycare provider or an in-home provider, and they can help families pay for that. The income guidelines for that program have risen every year. So a lot of families could qualify for this program and probably don't even know it. So in that resource book, there's a specific section in the front for childcare programs. Um, the cool thing about childcare referral and resource is they also use the McKinney Vento definition of homeless. So sometimes it can take 4 to 6 weeks plus to get these applications processed. But if a family's experiencing housing insecurity, if we reach out on their behalf and let them know, I just completed a one pager for a family and said, hey, I'm verifying that they're in a doubled up situation or fleeing domestic violence or in a hotel motel. That bumps their application to the top of the list to get processed. So those families have access to childcare funding very quickly. So being aware that those programs exist, right? Okay, think I think that's all I got. Do we have any questions? Anything else? All right. If not, or if you come up with something later, feel free to shoot me an email. A lot of what I do, part of what I do is answering phone calls saying, does this family qualify? And what can we do above and beyond the grant? And so I will add that I do take referrals for families that need a little bit more intensive case management. So I work with the parents of students as my family resource specialist title. I work with families to complete housing applications, get birth certificates and social security cards, access transportation to those appointments. And so sometimes families need more than here's an application, figure it out. We know that families struggle with literacy and transportation issues. So I meet families at a hotel. I filled out housing applications at Walmart parking lots, and we go and we take them and we drop them off. I have some funding that helps pay for the background checks. That's not McKinney Vento, but we were able to apply for some other funding. So there's some wonky stuff that we just meet families where they are, and if you have a family that needs a little bit more, if they're willing to work with me, refer them to me, and I'll do what I can.
And what you can is a lot. I can attest to that firsthand because you and I have collaborated with multiple families in the past, Savannah. Um, I wanted to touch on two things that you alluded to. I smiled when you said other duties as assigned, because that's so much of that, I feel like. And it's all coming to us so much in schools and community agencies and all that. And brings me to the point that you just made about like the income guidelines and what people could qualify for that they may not necessarily be aware of. There's a lot of working families I know that are trying to make ends meet that, I mean, could be helped by so many things that the awareness just isn't there. So the beauty of being able to do this and your presentation today, so much appreciated and so much great info, the resources and everything. I think in all of our lines of work, I mean, people are coming to us and just oftentimes not even knowing what it is that they do need. But that's they just need somebody to kind of quarterback their care and get it all aligned and all of that. So it's cool, and I call it American reality. This is just what we're dealing with right now. It's the reality of you're going to be filling out those applications in parking lots or meeting people at the hotel or whatever it is, because people are just trying to get by.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just triaging in that moment, right? So when we meet a family in crisis, it's like, well, yeah, they need housing, but in this moment, they need emergency shelter and they need some deodorant and some body wash and they need a can opener because the food pantry only gave them food that they can't open, you know? And so sometimes it's like we have to backstep 5 steps because any sentence that starts with if they would just XYZ, it is never that situation because families are not one dimensional. We're all a lasagna of issues, all of us, the whole lot of us. And so it is never as simple as if they would just fill out the housing application because a family that's in crisis maybe don't even have an ink pen. When you think about that, just the reality, a lot of these housing applications require a blue ink pen. They won't even take it if you write in black, or they need their birth certificates and social security cards. Well, I can tell you a mother that flees in the middle of the night from domestic violence probably doesn't have the opportunity to get a birth certificate or to get a social security card. And so that is one thing that I will add. All families experiencing McKinney Vento homeless in Illinois, if they were born in Illinois, have the right to a free birth certificate for the whole family, everybody. So district homeless liaisons can help apply for that. Community action can help apply for that. I have gotten a lot of birth certificates for families because even if they fill out the housing app, they won't process it without a birth certificate or a social security number. And so sometimes we have to take steps and get those obtainable, actionable steps. And it's 3 or 4 before we can even complete the app. There's my soapbox. Thanks for coming to my TED.
No, you're you're 100% spot on though, because the whole if they would just, my response to that is always we're well past that. You know, we're full service now. You know, we're helping people, we're meeting them where they're at. It's not if they would just, because yeah, let's be real. Somebody who left in the middle of the night didn't grab, you know, the necessary paperwork, the pens, you know, I mean, people aren't planning, people are surviving literally. And there's so much more of that, I think, than we probably realize.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me and I'll send you those QR codes. And if anybody has any questions, you've got my info. So thank you.
Fantastic. Savannah, thank you. So much appreciated. And I will get this recording and Savannah's presentation notes and then the QR codes and stuff sent out. Any questions or anything for the good of the group? I will let everyone know then. Thanks to everybody who attended today. Fantastic. We have Kaylee Brown with free mental health screenings and follow up. This is all grant funded and stuff for schools. This would be a fantastic opportunity for anyone who's looking to do that. I know there's a state mandate coming down briefly in the next couple of years that will mandate these. So getting out ahead of it. Oh, Savannah, you got so much good feedback. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was great. Much appreciated. So that's our November. Kaylee will be joining us in November. I potentially have one other presenter for November. But this time of the year with Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas all within 3 weeks of one another, breaks starting and all of that, we try to keep our meetings as quick as possible. So we're going to have everybody in under 50 minutes today. Thank you, Savannah, for a ton of info in a short time. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Nothing else for the good of the group. We'll see everybody next time. Thank you.
Have a good week, everybody.
You as well. Thank you so much again.